Imagine this, a weekend escape into the wild, rugged embrace of the Appalachian Mountains, where the air smells of pine and freedom, and the only sounds are the rustling leaves and your own heartbeat. That's what my girlfriend, Emily, and I lived for. Back then, we were tethered to high-stress jobs in a small Virginia town nestled right against those ancient peaks. Every Friday, we'd trade the buzz of deadlines for the quiet of the woods, chasing trails we'd never walked before. We'd done dozens of camping trips, each one a little reset button for our souls. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared us for what happened on that rainy Saturday in late spring. It all started innocently enough. We'd picked out a short, 3-mile trail called Raven's Path, one we'd never tried before. The online reviews raved about its hidden campsite, a flat, secluded spot perfect for a night under the stars. It was only a 45-minute drive from home, so we loaded up my old pickup with our gear: tent, sleeping bags, a cooler of snacks, the usual. The sky was gray as we set out, and by the time we were halfway there, fat raindrops started splattering the windshield. Typical mountain weather, nothing we hadn't handled before. We weren't about to let a little drizzle ruin our plans. When we pulled up to the trailhead, just a gravel pull-off beside a winding road, I noticed something odd. There was only one other vehicle, a sleek, silver SUV that looked way too fancy for a muddy hike. I figured a trail this popular would have more cars, but the emptiness suited us just fine. Less people, more peace. As we hauled our packs out of the truck, Emily nudged me and pointed. The SUV's passenger door was ajar, just a few inches, letting the rain seep in. We scanned the area, expecting to spot the owner fiddling with gear or stretching nearby, but the place was deserted. "That's weird," I muttered, stepping closer. The seat inside was already soaked, water pooling on the leather. Assuming they'd just forgotten to shut it, I reached over and pushed the door closed with a soft click. "Least it won't get worse," I said, shrugging it off as I rejoined Emily. She raised an eyebrow. "Who leaves a car like that unlocked out here? It's got to be worth a fortune." She had a point. It didn't add up, but the rain was picking up, so we grabbed our stuff and hit the trail. The path climbed steadily uphill, slick with mud and shrouded in mist. We moved fast, our boots squelching, eager to reach the campsite and get out of the downpour. It took us about 2 hours, maybe a bit more, to reach the top, a wide, level clearing carved into the mountainside. The first thing we saw was a small tent smack in the middle of the site. It was one of those tiny, single-person jobs, its faded green fabric sagging under the weight of the rain. We figured whoever it belonged to was holed up inside, waiting out the storm. Not wanting to crowd them, we picked a spot in the far corner and wrestled our own tent up, the wind tugging at the nylon as we worked. Once we were settled, we crawled inside, peeling off wet layers and digging into some sandwiches we'd packed. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof, loud enough to drown out the world. We'd been there maybe an hour, sipping water and letting our socks dry, when I heard something, muffled voices cutting through the storm. Curious, I tugged the zipper down a few inches and peeked out. My heart jolted. 2 guys were crouched just outside, their faces inches from the tent flap, staring right at me. I flinched, but they flashed wide, toothy grins. "Hey, didn't mean to spook you," one of them said, his voice overly chipper. They introduced themselves, Tom and Jake, they claimed, and said they'd been camped out in the little tent for a few days. I nodded, forcing a smile, and told them we were just Emily and Matt, staying one night. They shuffled back to their tent, and I zipped ours shut, turning to Emily. "That was off," I whispered. She frowned, her brow creasing. "Did you see them? Jeans and t-shirts in this weather? And that tent, it's way too small for 2 guys." She was right. They didn't look like hikers. No gear, no boots, no sense of purpose. My gut twisted, but I brushed it off. Maybe they were just eccentric. Still, we left the zipper cracked open, just enough to keep an eye on the clearing. An hour passed, nothing. No movement, no sound but the rain. Night fell, heavy and dark, and we decided to turn in. I zipped the tent fully shut, climbed into my sleeping bag beside Emily, and crashed hard, the exhaustion pulling me under. I don't know how long I was out. Hours, maybe, when my bladder jolted me awake. The rain hadn't let up, so I threw on a flimsy poncho, grabbed a flashlight, and slipped outside. I trudged a few yards behind the tent, picking a tree for cover, when I froze. Voices, low, indistinct, seeping through the patter of rain. I swung the beam around, my pulse ticking up, but the light caught nothing but dripping branches. Then I glanced at the little tent. Its flap hung open, swaying in the wind. Even in the dark, I could tell it was empty. Panic clawed at me. They'd said they were staying the night. So where were they? I bolted back to our tent, ducking inside and shaking Emily awake. "Babe, something's wrong," I hissed, my voice trembling. "Their tent's empty." She rubbed her eyes, groggy but alarmed. "What do you mean, empty?" Before I could answer, we both heard it. Voices again, closer now, right behind us. My stomach dropped. We weren't safe here. "Pack up, quick," I said, snatching my pocket knife from my bag. Emily started shoving stuff into her pack as I crept to the flap and peered out. There they were, Tom and Jake, standing just beyond the trees, maybe 10 feet away. The flashlight beam hit their faces, and I swear, they didn't even blink. No smiles, no movement, just blank, hollow stares boring into me. My blood ran cold. These weren't campers. They were predators. Emily poked her head out, and that snapped me out of it. "Run," I yelled, pointing toward the trail. She grabbed her bag and bolted, and I was right behind her, my boots pounding the mud. I threw one last look back as we hit the edge of the clearing. They hadn't moved an inch, just stood there, watching us vanish into the night. We sprinted for 10 minutes, adrenaline screaming through us, before slowing to a frantic hike. My bag was still in the tent, but I didn't care. Getting out alive was all that mattered. When we stumbled back to the truck, soaked and shaking, that silver SUV was still there, and its passenger door was open again. I didn't stop to think. I floored it to the nearest gas station, a flickering oasis of light, and we called the cops. They met us there, took our story, and promised to check it out. We went home, but sleep didn't come easy. A few days later, an officer called with an update that turned my stomach inside out. That SUV? It belonged to a guy in his 60s who'd been reported missing a week earlier. His wallet, keys, everything gone. The little tin up there was his, too, confirmed by a tag inside. Whoever those men were, they'd left no trace beyond some muddy boot prints. The old man, still missing, even now. Emily and I haven't camped since. The thought of it, of those two figures standing silent in the rain, still wakes me up at night. We'll never know what they planned, but I know this. We were seconds from finding out. And sometimes, I wonder if that open car door wasn't an accident, if it was bait, waiting for someone like us to bite. I didn't have hiking gear. My suitcase was all suits and ties, so I hit a sporting goods store at dawn, snagging some boots, a lightweight jacket, and a small backpack. I tossed in a water bottle and a few granola bars, then pointed my rental car toward the trailhead. By the time I rolled up just before noon, the lot was empty, just me and the whispering woods. Perfect. The online guide promised a full-day trek, there and back, and I was itching for the solitude. I locked the car, slung my pack over my shoulder, and stepped into the trees. The first hour was pure bliss. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the path in gold, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under my boots. Work stress melted away with every step, replaced by a quiet I rarely got to feel. I was lost in my own world when I spotted him, a guy sitting off to the side, maybe 50 yards ahead. He was slumped against a tree, head bowed, a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. At first, I thought he was asleep, some hiker taking a break. But as I got closer, he lifted his head and locked eyes with me. No wave, no nod, just a hard, unblinking stare that sent a chill down my spine. I quickened my pace, brushing it off as paranoia. Trails attract all types, right? Still, I kept glancing back, half expecting him to be trailing me. He wasn't, just sat there, watching me fade into the distance. 2 hours in, my legs were burning, so I found a fallen log by the path and dropped onto it, fishing a granola bar from my bag. I'd barely taken a bite when I saw movement up the trail. It was him again, hoodie up, walking my way. My stomach tightened. He was still far off, but close enough that I didn't want to stick around. I crammed my snack back into my pack and started moving, hoping to avoid whatever weird vibe he was giving off. No such luck. A few minutes later, I heard it, thudding footsteps, fast and heavy, closing in behind me. I swung around, and there he was, jogging right at me. My heart kicked into overdrive. I stepped aside, thinking he'd blow past, but he skidded to a stop, blocking my path. Up close, he was scruffy, unshaven, eyes sunken, maybe in his 30s. He didn't say a word at first, just reached into his pocket. I braced myself, ready to bolt, but he pulled out a beat-up brown wallet and thrust it at me. "Think you dropped this," he said, voice flat. I frowned, glancing at the thing. It was old, creased leather, not mine. I hadn't even brought a wallet, just my keys and phone. "Nah, man, that's not mine," I said, keeping my tone even. His eyes narrowed, and he shoved it closer. "I know it's yours. Take it." There was an edge to his voice now, a flicker of anger that made my skin crawl. The wallet was empty. I could tell from how it flopped in his hand. What was this guy playing at? A scam? A setup? I didn't know, but I didn't like it. "Okay, sure," I muttered, taking it just to de-escalate. He smirked, a crooked little twist of his lips, and said, "You're welcome," before turning and heading down the trail. I stood there, dumbfounded, clutching this random wallet. I flipped it open. Nothing inside. Not a card, not a scrap, just worn-out pockets. My mind raced. Was he trying to rob me? Distract me? Whatever it was, I wanted distance. I turned back toward the parking lot. 4 p.m. now, still 2 hours to go, and started walking, faster than before. The wallet stayed in my hand for a bit. Then I stuffed it in my pack, unsettled. Every rustle in the bushes had me jumping, every shadow a potential threat. I kept checking behind me, but the trail stayed empty. By the time I could see my car, the sun was dipping low, painting the woods in long, eerie shadows. The rental was parked facing the trailhead, a lone silver sedan in the gravel lot. I was maybe 20 feet away when I saw it. A man's shadow stretching from behind the car, crouched low, like he was waiting. My breath caught. I froze, staring at that dark silhouette, my mind screaming one word: him. The hoodie guy. He'd circled back somehow, and now he was here, lurking by my only way out. Running wasn't an option. He'd see me, and I didn't know these woods well enough to lose him. But standing there wasn't either. My hand slipped into my pocket, fingers closing around my keys. I took a slow breath, then veered toward the passenger side, moving quiet as I could. The shadow didn't shift. He hadn't spotted me yet. I clicked the unlock button, yanked the door open, and dove in, slamming it shut behind me. The lock snapped down just as he sprang up, a blur of motion on the driver's side. He pounded on the window, hard enough to rattle the glass, and I scrambled over the console into the driver's seat. It was him. Same hoodie, same wild eyes, now yelling, "Give it back. Give me the damn wallet." I fumbled the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life as he kept hammering the door. I threw the car into reverse, tires spinning gravel, and peeled onto the road. In the rear view, I saw him dart back into the trees, swallowed by the dusk. My hands shook on the wheel as I sped away, adrenaline buzzing. 10 minutes later, I remembered a police station I'd passed on the way in. I pulled into the lot, marched inside, and dumped the wallet on the counter with a rushed explanation. The officer took it, jotted some notes, and said they'd look into it. I didn't stick around for details, just drove straight to my hotel, locked the door, and called my buddy Nate to unload the whole insane story. "Dude, you're lucky he didn't knife you over that stupid thing," he said, half laughing, half serious. "I've turned it over in my head 100 times since. The wallet didn't mean anything. It was a prop, a weird lure to mess with me. Maybe he thought I'd pull out my own cash to prove it wasn't mine, or maybe he just wanted me off balance so he could jack my car. I don't know. What I do know is I got out with my stuff and my skin intact, and that's what counts. These days, I don't hike without a pocket knife clipped to my belt, just in case. You never know who's out there, watching from the trees, waiting for the right moment to hand you something you never asked for." Fall has always been my season. Crisp air, leaves crunching underfoot, the world painted in shades of amber and rust. My name's Ryan, and last October, I found myself itching for a solo hike, something to shake off the grind of everyday life. I've got a tight crew of hiking buddies, Jake, Sarah, and Mike, but their erratic schedules mean we don't sync up as often as I'd like. So, when a free weekend rolled around, I didn't wait for them. I picked a familiar spot, the Willow Loop Trail, a day-and-a-half trek that circles through fields and forests near my hometown in Maryland. I'd hiked it once before, years back, and loved its quiet beauty. This time, though, it had turned into something I'd never forget. Saturday morning, I was up with the sun, tossing my gear into my beat-up hatchback, a lightweight tent, a sleeping pad, some pre-packed food. The trailhead was just a short drive away, a gravel lot tucked off a country road. I parked, laced up my boots, and hit the path, the chill of late October nipping at my fingertips. The first few miles were easy, flat stretches of golden grass swaying in the breeze, the horizon dotted with distant hills. By midday, the trail dipped into a dense forest at the base of a small ridge, the canopy swallowing the light and wrapping me in cool shadow. It was peaceful, exactly the reset I'd been craving. I'd been trekking for hours, lost in the rhythm of my steps, when I spotted him, a guy up ahead, walking my way. He was too far off at first to tell much, just a dark shape against the trees. No big deal. Weekends bring out a few wanderers, even on a less traveled route like this. But as I closed the gap, something felt wrong. He had no pack, no water bottle, nothing. I was 6 or 7 hours in, deep into the loop, and here he was, strolling like he'd just stepped out for a quick jaunt. Odd, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he was local, knew a shortcut I didn't. He was close now, tall, wiry, wearing a faded jacket and jeans. As he neared, he raised a hand in a lazy wave. I nodded back, keeping it polite but guarded. You don't let your guard down out here, not when you're alone. He passed me, our boots scuffing the dirt in sync for a split second, and I kept moving. Then I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel as he stopped and pivoted. I glanced over my shoulder, and sure enough, he was facing me, hands in his pockets. "Hey," he called out, voice low and casual. "Where's your group at?" My stomach did a slow flip. Why'd he assume I had a group? Did he know me somehow? Or was he fishing to see if I was alone? Either way, it hit me like a warning bell. "They're coming," I lied, forcing a steady tone. Few minutes behind me. He tilted his head, studying me, then flashed a thin smile. "Good," he said, and turned back down the trail. I watched him go, his figure shrinking into the woods, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The next few hours, my mind wouldn't let it go. No pack, no gear, that creepy question, it gnawed at me. The solitude I'd craved started feeling like vulnerability. By late afternoon, the sun was sinking, and I decided to play it safe. I veered off the main path, hiking half a mile into the trees until I found a flat clearing shielded by thick pines. It wasn't visible from the trail, perfect. I pitched my tent, the nylon snapping taut in the fading light, and settled in. I wolfed down a cold sandwich, trying to shake the unease, then crawled inside to rest. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay there, staring at the tent ceiling, the forest's night sounds filtering through, crickets, wind, the occasional snap of a twig. I'd been down for an hour, maybe more, when it started. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the underbrush behind my tent. My heart slammed against my ribs. I held my breath, straining to listen. It wasn't an animal. Too steady, too human. They came closer, maybe 15 or 20 feet out, then stopped dead. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I didn't move, didn't dare unzip the flap. My mind raced. Deer don't walk like that. Bears don't pause like that. Someone was out there, waiting. I gripped my flashlight, knuckles white, and told myself I'd imagined it. Minutes dragged into hours, the quiet pressing down like a weight. No more steps, no fading crunch to signal they'd left. Were they still there, just beyond the trees? I couldn't tell, and that was worse than knowing. Dawn finally crept in, gray light seeping through the fabric. I'd barely slept, my body stiff with tension. I had to move, staying felt like tempting fate. I eased the zipper up an inch, peering out. Nothing but trees and mist. No shadows, no figures. I climbed out, scanning the clearing, my breath fogging in the cold. It was too quiet, the kind of stillness that screams something's off. I started breaking camp, folding the tent with shaky hands, jumping at every rustle. I was almost done when I saw them, fresh footprints in the soft dirt, right behind a tree 10 feet from where I'd slept. Panic hit me like a freight train. They were big, boot-sized, pressed deep. A man's tracks, no question. I didn't look for more, didn't need to. I slung my pack on, tent half attached, and bolted for the trail, crashing through branches in a blind sprint. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I hit the main path. I swung back toward the parking lot, moving fast, every snap in the woods spiking my pulse. The guy from earlier had to be him. No pack, no reason to be out here, and now this. Was he stalking me, waiting for night to make a move? The hike back was a blur, hours of pushing through fatigue, eyes darting to every shadow. The sun was dipping again when I finally saw my car, lone and dusty in the lot. I fumbled the keys, jumped in, and peeled out, gravel spitting behind me. Nothing followed, no figure in the rear view, no sound but the engine. I was safe, but the relief was hollow. I'd made it out, sure, but he was still out there. Back home, I spilled the whole thing to my crew over beers. Jake's eyes went wide. Dude, you're lucky he didn't corner you. Sarah nodded, grim. Sounds like he was sizing you up. I called the local cops the next day, gave them the rundown. Suspicious guy, footprints, the works. They said they'd log it, maybe send a ranger out, but I didn't hold my breath. No evidence, no crime, just a hiker's bad vibe. I still hit the trails, but never alone anymore. Group only, no exceptions. I've got a knife on me now, too, tucked in my pack, just in case. That night in the woods haunts me. The unseen eyes, the steps that stopped too close. Who was he? What did he want? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. But I hope no one else stumbles across him out there, alone in the dark, with no one to hear them run.